All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Read It Rant podcast, where we talk books, authors, storytelling, and everything happening between the pages. Today, I have an author joining me with one of those premises that immediately makes you stop and say, okay, I need to know how somebody came up with this. And imagine for a second a small southern county in the mid-1990s where candy isn't simply frowned upon, it's illegal. 4 years into Judge Emanuel Meek's Candy Ban, Goldwyn County has become a place where suspicion is normal, neighbors watch neighbors, and getting caught with sugar can potentially bring the law to your door. At the center of the story are Chet Kelly and his friend Freddie, whose discovery of a hidden stash of illegal candy pulls them into something much bigger than childhood mischief. Then you throw in the fearless Jimmy Sweetwater, the powerful Meeks family, small-town politics, friendship, rebellion, and underground candy economy, and you got a coming-of-age story that mixes humor, tension, nostalgia, and social satire. The novel is the Goldwyn County Candy Ban, and joining me today is author J Z Zerber. Buddy, I'd like to welcome you to the Read It Rant podcast. I'm really excited to get into the Goldwyn County Candy Ban with you. Before we get into the Goldwyn County Candy Ban, though, introduce yourself to everybody listening. You know, who is J Z Zerber, both as a writer inside and outside of writing?
What's up, Tony? Well, thanks for having me. I'm very excited. Been checking you out here for a little while. I'm new to TikTok, but since I became a part of TikTok, you stood out pretty quickly. I'm new to TikTok because I'm kind of I'm out of touch with technology, and I did embrace social media as a way to create some visibility for this novel. Otherwise, I'm really kind of out of touch with the whole social media thing. And I say that because I am kind of old-fashioned, and I have, I think, maybe a more old-fashioned view with regard to the kind of stories I like to write. I'm not necessarily, I am a romantic with regard to the past, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I write because I want to revisit that. When I was young, I wanted to be a time traveler. And so what that did for me is, well, one, I had a huge love affair with Back to the Future. I thought that was the best movie ever made. And then I studied history in college because I felt that was going to be the closest to kind of a time travel possibility without actually a time machine, is to at least revisit the past. And so as a writer delving into fiction, I wanted to do that as well. I love the past. I love nostalgia, the melancholic kind of flavor to nostalgia. And what it makes us feel. I think we all long for the good old days, and many of us do. And at least once we get to be perhaps my age, I'm in my 50s, and I look very lovingly to the past, especially the 80s and 90s, because to me it was just a different world, and the world today is unrecognizable to that world. And again, to be clear, I'm not trying to disparage the present. I'm not critical of it in that regard. I'm just, because it's hard to not seem like you're being disparaging of the past when you look back admiringly to the bygone era. But I wanted to write a story specific to the 1990s, even though I was the protagonist, Chat, is 11 in this story in 1995. When I was 11, it was in the 80s. But I picked the 90s specific because of the how pivotal that decade was in shifting us from the analog era to the era that we're in today. That was the quintessential decade where everything changed, in my opinion. This is the last decade where I felt boys could go out on bikes without GPS, that they could just kind of go out where parents really didn't know what you were doing. Because in the story, the kids, part of the novel is the kids have to journey about 14 miles away, and for the main hero, that is an insurmountable distance, to go on a bicycle at that distance. And I think today 14 miles is really compressed, and it doesn't seem as far away, even though it's the same geographical distance. I just feel that consciousness, we just understand distance a lot different because of all of the images and media available that can really transport us in those 14 miles in a way that these kids had to do it on bikes. So that was a big reason why I wanted to write this novel in that setting. That's why I want to write, period.
Yeah, I reminisce every day about the old day. I was born in 1990, so like I miss the old days. Like, you were right. I remember as a kid we used to actually ride our bikes further than we were supposed to. We used to like disappear into the woods. Like I remember, I lived in like the suburbs, and there was like a cul-de-sac, and there was a house that was set a driveway that was set back, and there was woods behind those homes, and there was like tree houses and stuff in those woods, and we would just get we would have so much fun, and I just look back and I'm sad, man. Like it makes me like morose in a way because like kids today will never understand the freedom and just the authenticity of the traditional, just everything traditional about that era. Even in the '80s, like I don't know. I look back on um, family and who I used to know and who's no longer with us, and everything. It's just such a I miss it, and I'm not disparaging the what's going on right now either. It's a fondness that I will always have like I guess in your words like a romantic feel to it because it's a love for a time that's just it's gone, and
Yeah.
all we can do is look back and reminisce. But do you remember, the point when writing changed from something you enjoyed doing into something you thought where you thought I could actually publish a novel?
Well, that's a great question. I was thinking about this the other day. I've always wanted to be creative, and I tried different things. In my 20s, I thought I was going to be a guitarist. I really loved David Gilmour. He was my idol, still is, and I wanted to play like him. And I was really committed. I bought a guitar, I got lessons, I got my pick, and I played really hard for like 6 hours, and then that was it. That like that was like I'm like that was my commitment, and so I did that about 3 times throughout a 10-year period where I'd buy a guitar, I'd think I was going to do it, and I really felt I wanted it, but it never panned out because I did not have really the grit or determination to do it. That changed with writing, and I had dabbled with writing a little bit. I went to creative writing classes at University of Colorado in Boulder, just to kind of feel it out, see what it was like, and it was kind of cool, workshopping and writing short stories and stuff like that. Um, and then I abandoned that for a while. And then I started, when I was living in Colorado, conceiving of this fictional county set in the South, which is where I'm from. But I lived in Colorado for 20 years. And I was writing what was at the time Goldwyn County. I hadn't really given it a name, but I wanted to create this world. And I gave some pages to someone, a writing professional, and he enjoyed it. And he said, "You should keep doing this. This is you got something here. Just keep at it." And so the that's when there was a shift from me with the guitar and me with pen and paper, where I didn't just stop right out of the gate. And especially when it got hard, I remember I was able to really get momentum and take breaks, and I really pushed through it. And that happened about, I'm going to say, 15 years ago, when I really started writing anything that I would consider to be substantial that I would return to. That was the other key part, and that I kept doing. And and ever since then, I've been doing it. It took me 10 years to publish this novel or launch it because I had written it as a screenplay a long, long time ago, and I knew no one was going to read it. But it was fun to write, and if anything, it gave me a lot of structure for the novel. And because there's action adventure in the novel, the screenplay helped me really capture the action adventure because screenplays can be very action oriented. And I'd written the screenplay, and then I went through spurts where I would create and write the novel itself, and then read pauses because of life. And 10 years later, I finally had a final push where I finished it. I gave it to a copy editor, a line editor, and actually more developmental editor, in that he and I talked about the novel. I met him in 2019, and then I reunited with him, Jordan, in 2024, and he was instrumental in the whole thing. And it just became something that I wanted to do and wanted to finish. I knew that there was something interesting about the story that I wanted to share with the world. And ultimately, I would like to do this for a living. I mean, that's really what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I need to make millions of dollars, but I would like to justify doing it by having some type of income to help supplement that effort. Because my wife is like, "What are you doing?" Because I spent a lot of money on getting the book ready. I wanted to look as professional as possible. Cover artist, copy editor, proofreader, formatter. Like I found them. Yeah, these are writing. These are professionals, and I said, okay, I want this novel to look as good as possible. Like I'm self-published. We're already up on an uphill battle, because maybe of legitimacy or whatever. I think that's changing quite a bit. So at least you want to present something where people, if they hold it, they go, okay, this looks really professional. And now I have gone to a different level where it's just in my blood. So it was really trial and error, some grit and determination, and then finding that momentum enough to finish it. And now that it's finished, I'm working on a second project, and we talked about the 80s. There's a prequel to this story, which is going to take me back to the 80s, and I'm fully committed at this point. I work on it all the time. My wife understands what I'm doing. She gets it now that there's an actual physical copy in the world. She's like, okay, this isn't just a pipe dream. This, he really wants to do this, and he believes in it. And I couldn't be prouder of the novel itself.
Yeah, I know. Speaking of playing the guitar, man, I actually had a teacher teach me how to do it. A friend of mine actually spent time with me because learning the guitar is it is a it looks like it's such a simple instrument, but there are so many ways you can play that thing. There's so many like different variations of guitars, necks, like everything, fretboards, different fretted notes. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So I get it. And I know I had a sixth grade English teacher. She always told me, practice makes permanent, and she's like, practice does not make perfect; it makes permanent. So,
Yeah.
I kept at it and I had it, but let me tell you, it wasn't simple. But I know writing a book is it's a lot easier in my opinion than playing a guitar. It's very strenuous. But what writers, filmmakers, books, or movies had the biggest influence on the kind of storyteller you eventually became?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, I like one of my favorite movies is Fargo. So right out of the gate, I'm a big Boogie Nights fan. Pulp Fiction, Big Lebowski, No Country for Old Men. I like darker themed stories, especially if there's humor in it. I find Pulp Fiction to be one of the funniest movies ever made.
It
You know,
is. It really is.
I find Fargo to be hysterical as well.
Hmm.
I just think satire is my thing, and if it's
Hmm.
executed well, it's a very enjoyable um,
About
way
History of the
of
World Part One.
History of the World Part. Like Mel Brooks. Okay, yeah. I mean, so we're going back to the '70s now. Blazing Saddles. I mean, there's just like people
So
who
much.
execute it well, and Mel Brooks was a master at that stuff. Monty Python. I mean, the Holy
Mon-
Grail and Life of Brian. I mean, just
mhm.
anything that was weird or maybe a little off the map and funny and controversial even, I always resonated with that. I like being uncomfortable and laughing at the same time. There's just
Mhm.
something about that. As far as books, I've always been drawn to Faulkner. I like Faulkner quite a bit. Maybe a lot of that has to do with why I chose Goldwyn County, in the South and things like that. Virginia Woolf, Garcia Marquez, um, giants that I've always aspired to, not even come close to necessarily, but just like I remember reading their books and thinking, wow, this is profound. And film and books are vastly different in that regard, and there's like I watched the rendition of 100 Years of Solitude, and it's lacking something, that it's just the book is just it captures the essence of what Garcia Marquez is trying to do with regard to isolation and memory and stuff that the adaptation to do. So you have both, you have, because I write very cinematically. To me, Goldwyn County Candy Ban is very cinematic, and some of the reviews and commentaries have been cinematic prose, that it reads like a movie, because it is very visual to me. I'm a very visual person. I like a lot of action, and I like a lot of humor. But I do feel that I would say I'm much more of influenced by film than I have been about reading necessarily. and I watch a lot of things that help me understand how people talk. And if there's one thing I'm watching or looking for when I read, is how people are talking. And to me, that's really what's most intriguing about writing, is the dialogue component. You know, hearing people speak, because I do give these characters a lot of autonomy in the sense that I like the idea of almost the characters that I write to rebel against me and say, no, fuck off. I'm my own. You're not going to dictate to me what I can and can't do. And so I just feel like I don't know what they feel or are until they really start to talk. And that's when I feel like the story really starts to take shape, is when that happens. And it's a very interesting relationship in that regard.
Gotcha. And I think I want to start with the obvious question: why candy? Where did the idea of making something as harmless and universally recognizable as candy being illegal? Where did that come from?
Well, I like the idea of Goodfellas meets the Goonies. So that was kind of. Can I just swore, Tony, and I'm sorry if
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, well, this isn't TikTok. You can. I have no security protocols. That's one of the reasons why I use my studio, man.
So can I swear?
Yeah, man.
Okay. And I'm not going to do it. I'm not just going to do it all the time, but it's specific to this example. I wanted to write a mob story, but with kids, and I was thinking what the contraband would be, and I thought, well, obviously it would be candy. And I went up to my wife one day and I said, listen, I have this idea of this character going into a treehouse and sitting down and looking across from the town badass and saying to him, "Where in the fuck is my candy?" And my wife just started cracking up.
It's like, where the fuck is my money? But instead
Yeah,
of where
that's
the fuck is my money, where's my Reese's Pieces?
That's right. Where's my fucking Reese's Pieces, man? Anyway, so, and when she laughed, I'm like, okay, let me give this a shot. And that was the first scene that I ever wrote, is the treehouse scene between Jimmy Sweetwater and Zacharias Meeks. And Zacharias, that's one of the first things he ever says as a character in the novel, is, "Where in the fuck is my candy?" And that it just kind of went from there. I just looked at mob story dynamics, right? The conflict, dealing like, and the like the guy that finds or gets involved in a bad situation, and he's the last person that should be in that situation, and he does not, under any circumstances, want to be in that situation. And so obviously you have a lot of fun with that. It's underground candy rings. It's family histories between the Sweetwaters and the Meeks, the powerful, affluent political family versus the more grassroots, down-to-earth moonshine family with a history of having saved the town due to what Jimmy's father did to help kind of regalvanize Goldwyn County after a tragic accident. Anyway, so that is how that began. But then as I was writing it, I found that there was an adult component too, and so I explored that as well. And you really have kind of two stories that converge in the end. But the kid story was really geared towards mob-like turf type of, this is my turf, this is my candy. I mean, Zacharias is smuggling candy. Like he has an underground candy economy. And one of the duffel bags gets lost, and that's where Chat finds in the woods. And he's like, cool, because he needs something. He takes it to Jimmy. Jimmy's like, okay, I'll get it from you. But then he finds out it's from the bad guy, and then Jimmy goes to Chat, going, "Hey, dude, you know who you just got me involved in? Now you're in this bullshit too." Anyway, so it's very kind of predictable mobster tropes and things like that. But that's how that started.
So instead of like the Godfather, this is a Sicilian message, and then instead of that, it's like, this is a Hershey Kiss message. He gonna be sleeping in the candy factory, that kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh my God! Did you ever establish rules for yourself regarding how seriously the characters should treat the Candy Ban?
Well, I treated it very seriously myself, so that was the beginning. And I had a reviewer say that the premise seems bonkers, but J Z Zerber commits to it so wholeheartedly that it works. And so that was probably the biggest compliment that I could get, because through me, then the character. Yeah, I mean, there is a self awareness that it's batshit.
Mm-hmm.
The community understands that there's something really off here. That
Uh-huh.
this like, but it is so kind of Meeks is so convincing to at least the ones that support it.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a slippery slope type of dilemma, what he introduces seems innocuous, but then it grows and becomes something far more insidious.
Mm-hmm.
And by then it becomes a little bit too late. But he's gathered a great amount of supporters that are in favor of the Candy Man, not so much because of what it represents in terms of candy, but his promises of strengthening the community and health and things like that. So people are
Mm-hmm.
really on board with that. So you have the adult component and many that buy into it and kind of tell on each other through suspicion if someone's not upholding the candy ordinance. And then you have the kids who are just kind of just being kids going, what the hell, man? We had candy. Halloween is gone and we can't trick or treat. So there's that kind of the kids' view of it, and as well as the adult, and they're kind of on separate levels. But I did focus primarily on the kids, because the kids, in at the end of the day, in the story, regardless of whether they can eat candy or not, are still dealing with like middle school and bullies and girls. And so those things I focused on primarily, is just how that was manifesting around them while this insane little candy law was being enacted, on top of the main character finding something that got him to a lot of trouble.
And I know the Goldwyn County does contain a lot of surveillance and neighbors watching neighbors. Was there something interesting about exploring surveillance in a world before digital surveillance became like really a part of everyday life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a like, surveillance is in all of my stories. I look at even early drafts of stories that I wrote back in the past, and I have a very Orwellian suspicion of society. That
Mm-hmm.
this, or Foucault even talks about self policing, and the panopticon, where behind you, like, there's this glass, um, it's like, I guess it's a prison, and there's this tower and there's glass, and you don't know if anyone's behind it, but the prisoners can see it, but they can't see what's behind it. But you don't technically have to have anyone there. It's just the idea that someone might be there that
Mm-hmm.
causes you to behave in a certain way. And I think surveillance society is really about that. And Tattled, the community snitch organization in the story, is helping surveil, in that people begin to second guess, or to look over their shoulder based on the choices that they're making. And it's a creepy feeling, man, to feel that you're being watched, whether it's on
Mm-hmm.
our computers or wherever it may be. The world has changed dramatically to where, um, it's just everywhere. And the point about the 90s is, again, this is a pivotal decade in that is where it's starting, to me, to become ubiquitous, to where it's really going to, like Freddie, his father's installing a security camera in his store. This is a new thing for at least, his business, and Freddie himself. And Freddie's even like, I like watching people when they don't know they're being watched. This idea that he's also watching um, other people through a camera. So I wanted to touch on that, because I do think that when we think we're being watched, there is a tendency to behave accordingly. But 9 times out of 10, we're not even being watched, which is kind of ironic to me.
Yeah. How much research did you do to make sure like the language, culture, technology, and everyday details actually felt like 1995 rather than like a modern story wearing a 1990s costume?
That's a great question. Well, fortunately, I was alive. I was very cognizant during the 90s, and I felt like, I remember watching Terminator 2 and repeatedly, and I remember talking about Terminator 2 and how mind blown we were away. So I knew that was going to be Freddie's favorite movie. I remember the type of the shift between VHS and DVD. Um, and I mean, as far as research itself, I did research. I mean, I Google or just looking up movies that like what were the movies in the 90s, and I would look at those and I go, okay, I kind of remember that, and then I might research or even watch that movie a little bit and draw from that. Like I remember Friday was a big movie, and I mentioned Friday in the film. And I'm also very, I don't describe much in terms of what characters wear. I don't describe much outside of just maybe more cultural zeitgeist type of details. And I mean, there's news media. I remember CNN and the OJ trial. I remember the Bronco driving down the highway, and the Atlanta bombings and the Olympics, and just the news media frenzy related to that. And I knew that this story was going to capture a little bit of that there was going to be this gleam in Meeks's eyes with regard to how he was going to use news entertainment to help spread not so much his message, but just the entertainment value of what he was doing. You know, the idea that cameras were allowed in courtrooms, you know, to film a proceeding or a trial or things like that. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, to get into that and to like, for example, the dirt bikes, I imagine that they're Diamondback, but I never say that. You know, like I didn't get too specific in the details of the actual what they were riding or things like that. But I would say a lot of it was very visceral.
Was Goldwyn County inspired by like any particular real world Southern communities, or is it like more of a fictional combination of places and experiences?
Well, Goldwyn County, I live in Pensacola, Florida, Escambia County, and there are some landmarks here that made it into the story. I I guess am drawn to the heat in the South, and I'm drawn to the mixture between rural settings and urban settings. Like, I like the rural component as much as I like the urban component, and so I don't think I would ever write a book based in a city. And interestingly, I call Goldwyn County Goldwyn County. I don't ever mention a town. I don't ever mention a city. I don't ever mention downtown anything. It's just, to me, visually more country with pockets of urbanization emerging due to the innovations of Judge Meeks. And I wanted to pick a small town in the South specifically because of my, I guess, love for Jimmy Sweetwater, who is a very country kid, let's just say. Okay. I'm sure there are a bunch of badasses in the world, in this country. He is a very southern specific badass. And I don't know, I feel comfortable in the South. I guess it's almost, again, more of an intuitive, when I'm writing a scene that's set in the South, I just feel like I'm there also, and that, I think, helps me orientate myself better in a certain scene. Whereas if I was writing something, in the East Coast or maybe the West Coast, I may not have that same instinct. I just feel very comfortable. This is my home. I like the cadence and dialect of speech, and I like to play with that also in dialogue. And Goldwyn is also an opportunity to create other standalone pieces, but within the same fictional county, because they are all going to be interrelated to some degree. Even in the story that I'm writing now, there's a brief mention of a candy ban long ago, because the story that I'm writing now is set in 2012, and this story is set in 1995. And I don't bring a lot of it back, but there is this kind of connectivity to it, right? There's this, like, oh, I remember this from this time, and maybe I have a character play a cameo briefly, and I might, like I said, write a prequel and a sequel to the actual Candyman story, but that's not going to happen now. So for me, this county is to be specific to the South, to base it mostly on my relationships with the people that I've met here through the different industries that I've been in, which is coffee, concrete, and grocery. And those are all present in any of the story that I write, especially concrete lately. In Goldwyn County Candy Ban, Montgomery Williams is a concrete worker, and he's the father of the son that they go out to Ensley that's going to help them help Jimmy on his mission. And it's just my home, and I just want to write about my home.
Mm-hmm. Did you model Jimmy Sweetwater, because you mentioned Goodfellas, after Jimmy the Gent?
No, and Jimmy is a kid that, see, I was messed with a lot as a kid because I was a scrawny little kid, and when I was messed with, I wanted to become kind of like a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to kick the shit out of the people that were messing with me, right? I think any kid wants that.
Yeah, I actually did that in 6th grade because I got tired of this. Sorry, my French. I don't body shame, but this fat kid was messing with me on the bus. One day I woke up in a bad mood and I just punched him.
Yeah.
Like that's back in the day when you could do that and wouldn't get in trouble. But
and that would suggest that you had some balls at least, and I didn't. And like I could never get to that point. And Jimmy, when I wrote this story, I'd always remember that because there's a lot of me in chat. He's a timid, soft-spoken, very tentative and quiet kid that doesn't want to get mixed up in anything, primarily because he's scared of the world. Okay,
mm-hmm.
like his choice to lock himself in his room and study is because he doesn't feel he's equipped to navigate through the world that's changing outside of his bedroom. And Jimmy is a way for him to do that. And so Jimmy is essentially the kid that I wish I could have turned into when I was that age. And so I just wrote him in that regard. I knew that he was just going to be... And look, having grown up in the South, also, when I was in middle school, you just would see kids who knew how to fight. Like, young kids that just instinctively knew how to throw a punch and beat the shit out of someone. And I always looked at that going, man, that's impressive. Like, how do you do that? Like, one, to be able to execute that, but two, to even have, like, to be grounded enough to do something like that. And I knew that when I wrote this character, that Jimmy was going to embody those characteristics. That he was just going to be the proverbial town badass that would not stand down to anybody.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to me that day, man. I just had enough, and after that day, man, we were best friends. That dude didn't mess with me anymore.
Yeah.
But you are right. There are some kids that it's just the instinct.
Yeah.
But what interests you about the idea that ordinary citizens can gradually become participants in enforcing an unusual system simply because it's become normalized?
Well, I mean, I guess some of it is drawn a little bit from my readings back in the day of the Soviet Union and how people would kind of snitch on each other if they didn't toe the line. And so there was some inspiration to that. And I think that just because it happens in the Soviet Union or happened in the Soviet Union, that it can't happen anywhere else. I'm not saying that that I did play around with the word tattled and tattletarianism, because I am, if anything, kind of drawing on totalitarianism and just this idea that free thought and free action is restricted, and it's funny because I did write this 10 years ago and where all the plot points were really in place and the idea of the story was in place, and then you see what happened with contemporary culture, and I found that there were many parallels, which may have been an inspiration to really finish this thing. Um, I don't know. I did find a lot of what was happening in society recently to be very alarming in terms of I feel a certain way, I think a certain thing. I don't feel that I should be excommunicated for that, especially if in my mind what I'm thinking and feeling isn't isn't harmful. Like if and that became the debate between what is harmful and what isn't. And to me, sugar was a part of that. It starts out as it's just a natural ingredient in food and baked items that people love. To oh, you're baking with sugar, you're abusing children. You know what I mean? Like there's like how that evolved from just a candy ordinance restricting candy to include sugar, and then the sentiment behind how people could dare use sugar because of how harmful it is. I just wanted to explore that, and honestly, I wish I had explored it more, because I found that was a very interesting part of the novel. It's just that it was getting too long, and I had to cut it off at some point. But I was very curious about how people could, one, deem something to be harmful that in many eyes isn't, and two, the extent to which they would go in order to turn someone in, like go into someone's house, the kind of insanity that goes into a type of enforcement because you feel that other people are injuring you.
That describes today's generation like to a T.
And so I find that stuff interesting.
I mean, you get into looking like the news and stuff and how things are geared today. I think it's crazy that something can happen. There's a serious catalyst, and all of a sudden, you're right. There's something else that comes along that may cause injury to this person. Now we have to ban that. And I think at some point you have to draw the line. Like enough has to be enough. You can't just ban everything because somebody's feelings got hurt or something happened. It's life. Things are gonna happen. Things are gonna happen. Your feelings are gonna get hurt. That's just part of living. Um, and I think that's a very good point. But without getting into spoilers, I really want to talk about Chet Kelly. What kind of kid is Chet when readers first meet him?
Um, well, the very first line is I hate chicken legs, and
Oh,
because I think that I was called bird chest. I wasn't called chicken legs, and I thought it
same
was
here.
bird. I was
I got I got called chicken legs, so yeah.
bird chest. And he's bullied by Ted Kitchens, but in a very specific way in a dodgeball game. And then we meet Freddie, who comes and very graciously, sticks up for his best friend. I knew that Chat and Freddie were going. I knew that Freddie was going to be a part of Chat's life, because I did kind of have a Freddie. I may not have had a Jimmy, but I did have someone that did stick up for me in many ways. And Chat is just a kid that does not understand why the world has to change. He went from elementary school to middle school, and that transition alone is very alarming to him. And he wants to do well in school because his father did, and he puts a lot of pressure on himself. He's a good kid. He says, "Ma'am, sir." He does his chores. As a parent, I would imagine he'd be a joy, to parent, and that he kind of just keeps to himself and does what he has to do. But the problem is that he's also learning and discovering girls, and there happens to be a girl in the story, and that's kind of what changes everything, because that's what changed for me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Kim. I won't say her last name. Who knows? But there's a girl named Kim. I was 10th, 11th grade, and I had a crush on her, and she pulled me aside where it was an empty hallway, because we had like adjoining classrooms, and to get from one to the other you had to go through a hallway. And she pulled me into the hallway and she kissed me on the lips, just a peck on the lips, and it blew my mind. Like, it changed my life forever. Like, ever since that day, I was like, okay, chasing that, and I feel that even a kid like Chat is going to succumb to the smile of a pretty girl, and that's what happens to him in the story, and that's what really gets him in trouble. But people have said that he's super relatable. He's an underdog. He's your classic underdog, and he needs an ensemble of people to help him, and he's super reluctant about that. He doesn't want to do any of the things that's required of him to do, as any hero might be in any story. I mean, that's the point of fiction, Tony, is that you're watching people get involved in things that they don't want to be a part of, and if they weren't a part of it, then there would be no story. So that's the whole point. The character arc happens through that conflict and that resolution, and he's very likable. He's a good lead for a story, and I didn't really intend to write a story with an 11-year-old lead at all, especially dealing with darker themes. And I don't know still to this day if people understand what it is that they're going into when they first hear about it. It's like, okay, dude, you got an 11-year-old protagonist, but in a Goodfellas, Stand By Me kind of feel. Like that's very strange. I think once I get over that hump, then I might myself be able to articulate really what the book is more so than I'm able to now. But he is a very easy character to root for.
So when you have to write a group of boys this age, like how did you keep their personalities and voices distinct, especially with these darker themes?
Well, that's a good question too. And Jordan and I talked a lot about characterization, and he said that distinctive characters is a strength of the novel. And so for me, it's really about, like I said before, going into the character not really knowing a lot about what they're going to say. Now, I know what they are. I kind of have an idea of what they are. But Freddie, Chat, Zacharias, and Jimmy are all just super different, And it's really just focusing on how those characters talk, what they want. Really, how they talk is very much related to what it is that they want. And when I focused just on what Chat wanted, what Freddie wanted, what Jimmy wanted, and what Zacharias wanted, which are all very different goals. Okay, Chat just wants to study. He wants to do well for Mrs. Pearson's class. Freddie wants to take over. He just wants to watch movies all the time and be one of Jimmy's treehouse brothers. Jimmy wants redemption for being betrayed and wants to uphold the legacy of his family. He knows that being a Sweetwater is a big deal. And Zacharias wants his fucking candy. It's like, and just, so those four, and then Rodell to a certain degree, who's more of a supporting character. But those four were really the ones that seemed separate enough to be able to just kind of focus on them individually. And with Zacharias, I just focused on the evil nature of him. Like, he has no arc, for example. He is just pure, he's like Michael Myers evil. Like, he's just like a constant walking evil machine, who, if anything, is just symbolic of evil and nothing more. Chat, does he get what he wants? Well, no spoilers there, but like just focusing on those things, there's a vulnerability to him that was easy to kind of tap into, a timidity, as I mentioned, innocence, and so what did he want? Well, he just wanted to be in his room, and then Freddie is a kid that is just oblivious to danger. He's just one of those kids that doesn't perceive danger at all, thinks everything is an adventure, wants to pretty much live the movies that he sees. And there's even a scene where he's inspired by a movie that he watched, and he gets Chat and himself out of trouble by having done the scene from the movie, and he can't be phased. And that's a interesting kind of personality to have. It's just to he just loves food. You know? He's not interested in girls necessarily. He just wants to be in Jimmy's treehouse, you know, and that's it. And Jimmy, like I said, my favorite character. There's a lot of pressure on him, and for me, writing him was about not showing any cracks in that. You know, even though internally he may have felt some things, I'm not very I don't go much into introspection with characters outside of the protagonist. I do occasionally. There was one part with Jimmy where I, as the author, told the reader that he hated spiders, but he couldn't show Zacharias that, because Zacharias carries around a pet spider as a way to torment. And it's a menacing, ugly fucking spider, like a black, shiny spider that's as big as his hand. And he carries Lucy in a jar, and he puts people's hands in Lucy's jar to get them to confess, you know, whatever it is that he needs. And his question is, "You're going to tell me where my candy's at?" And Jimmy's like, "No, I'm not." And Jimmy hates Zacharias. And Caleb Sweetwater, Jimmy's father, hates Judge Emmanuel Meeks. And it's primarily because they are both very popular and significant in the county, but for vastly different reasons. And Jimmy understands that there's a long legacy of Sweetwaters, and he knows that there's something that happens that makes a Sweetwater Sweetwater, and he feels like he's in that moment. In many ways, Tony, this story is as much Jimmy's as it is Chat's. And if anything, there's kind of a parallel between the two. The story is really them and their relationship, which obviously starts off very tense, but then evolves and changes into something a little bit more fraternal. And it was just really focusing on those interests or those drives from those characters that allowed me to really explore a lot of what they were without crossing over and blending characters.
And without getting into any spoilers, and speaking of Judge Meeks, what interested you about putting this kind of authority in the hands of a judge?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question, because I think it largely had to do with the black robe. You know, I think it was just like the Darth Vader kind of. If it weren't for the robe, I just think judge is more poignant than a county commissioner, because they're the ones that legislate. You know, it's like he's going to enforce the candy ban that others essentially legislate, but he has such major influence in town that he's able to do that. But it's kind of the judge, like even the word judge, like I'm judging you. Like I just wanted to focus on him almost as a celebrity, and I think that was my choice why I picked a judge.
And I know, especially with effectively antagonistic figures, you know, usually because they're justified, and the judge is they're the final authority. You know, how important was it for you to understand Meeks' reasoning rather than simply writing somebody like Zacharias, who wakes up one day and just decides to be evil and is evil?
Well, and you know, that's a good question too, because there's a scene between Judge Meeks and his law school buddy. I guess I forget his name, Dawson. I think his name was Dawson. I can't remember, but more than the name, it was their relationship, and that scene tends to reveal a little bit more of Meeks' motivation. And I remember going into that scene wondering what I was going to reveal and what I wasn't. And I do think that what I do put in there may have highlighted some things that, had I not highlighted, we wouldn't really have a clear sense of what Meeks' motivation was. Is it health? Does he really care about the community? Or is it something else? And I wanted to keep that somewhat vague so that we could also understand as a reader the way that we understand our own politicians. We don't know what our politicians are really like. We don't know what they really think. We speculate a lot. Mm-hmm. And based on my affinity for any particular party or politician, whatever they say, I'm going to believe wholeheartedly, or I'm going to disagree with wholeheartedly, depending on my position with them. And so I wanted to present Meeks as the same way also, that the town either supported him or they didn't. It wasn't altogether clear what it was that he was trying to do, but the results were clear in that he was helping build the community by bringing business in, outside investment, growing the county into something significant, and taking it out of maybe the Middle Ages. You know, like the big thing is that he paved the dirt roads, right? That he actually put asphalt on dirt roads. Like he's modernizing Goldwyn. And many people at face value might think that that's a good thing, you know, and other people might think, well, I'm suspicious of that. You know, why is it that he's really doing that? I know he's greatly concerned with the accident that happened in '72. He uses that as motivation for shifting or creating the candy ordinance, because he feels that really ultimately youth it's where that is where that begins. And I think it's conveyed that he really wants a community to be strong. It's just a question of whether he has legitimately created that or not. And I think that's more of the debate from the community. What is the legitimacy here? Is it legitimate? Is what he's doing legitimate? Is he interpreting law in a certain way to defend outrageous policies, or is he within his legal right to, you know? So these kinds of things that I think, that echo our own narratives in modern society. Like, what is this person doing, and how we shape things to kind of fit the bias that we have of any given issue.
Gotcha. And I know you did mention prequels and sequels. You know, without giving anything away about how the Golden Candy Ban ends, do you feel like there are more stories that are waiting to be told in Goldwyn County?
Yes, and it's interesting because there is a prequel and a sequel to this story. I'm torn as to which one I want to do first. I think commercially there's a tendency to maybe put out a sequel, but I'm not a very conventional thinker. You know, I almost make things a little bit more difficult for myself in that I kind of am a little too strict in that, and that I do what I want. I write what I want. I don't have an audience in mind. Someone on Reddit said I was doomed to fail and that I shouldn't write a sequel because of how unmarketable my novel is. And, you know, I'm a smartass, so I replied with a smartass remark. And, you know, because, like, who would say that to someone? Like, anyway, so I was just like,
trolls,
whatever.
Man. They're just trolls. I mean,
just
people
and
suck.
so I do want to stick to what's authentic for me, and I do feel inclined to move more towards a prequel. But I also feel that Meeks' role would be more distant. Like I've even imagined that he would be represented more through television, where the story is going to be from another perspective, you know, who's affected by the rise of Meeks' dynasty, but also has his own kind of story to deal with. And I'm always, Tony, going to come at it from an angle that's not very direct. You know, I do like kind of having unconventional methodologies, I guess, in terms of how to convey something that I think is a lot richer, you know, and it helps me enjoy what I'm doing a lot more.
Well, I know every author I've ever read. I mean, especially like Terry Goodkind or Raymond Feist or Terry Brooks, or I mean, they always release, and even like Catherine Kurtz with the Journey series. Like, I don't know an author that doesn't release their original books first and then goes back and write the prequel. Um, I mean, there's a lot of authors that they just write what they feel like they want to write. You know, it's your story. You should tell it how you feel. You know, you're compelled to tell it. I don't think anybody should be able to dictate to you how you do that. You know.
Yeah.
But where can listeners follow you and really keep up with future books and everything happening in Goldwyn County?
You know, I guess the best thing would be a mailing list through my website, goldwyncountylegends.com. Like I said, I am on TikTok, I am on Instagram, and I am on Facebook. I'm not very active on these platforms, and I think that'll change one day. I'm just still trying to figure out. I mean, I got a kid. I got another one coming. I'm an older parent. You know, my wife and I have opposite schedules. really, and I'm trying to write. I really don't have a lot of time to do something that you do. For example, I mean, it's commendable that you
Mm.
make time to do something like that. I mean, I know you have a family too.
Oh yeah.
Um, and how's your kid, by the way? How's your
Oh,
son?
my kids are good. My older son just had surgery on the 21st of July. He finally got a G tube, so, and then he starts school in like not even in less than a month. So like my life has been hectic. So I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't have a lot of time, and I don't know what to post really. I guess I'm also a kind of a somewhat awkward person in front of a camera, and so I don't know. I don't know. My website, sign up to mailing list. I have a story called Good Old Willie coming out, which is a short companion piece to Goldwyn County. Not the Candy Ban story; they're completely separate. This is um, working class men at a construction site waiting for a truck, and they talk about morality, and it's more philosophical. It's a short read. And then there's going to be a follow up with this character from the story in a larger kind of ensemble story. And anyone who wants to know anything about that, if they sign up to my mailing list on my website, GoldwynCountyLegends.com, that's where there's a lot more enthusiasm on my part. That to me, like the website for me is a great place for me to go to and explore social, the social media component with a lot more enthusiasm.
With that good old Willie, what sect of philosophy do you focus on in that morality, like Stoicism, Immanuel Kant, Nietzsche, or who do they? Because I love philosophy. That's one of my favorite subjects to read about, besides what I usually read.
Well, there is kind of maybe that dichotomy between Plato and Aristotle. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's two characters there that tend to embody, whereas Plato's pointing up to the heavens, Aristotle's gesturing towards the horizons, like the more material versus the more ideal. And that conversation is what's framing the moral component. And there is a religious component too, specific to the main character. That's I'm not necessarily coming through it from that. Again, I give my characters a lot of autonomy, but it is a question related to what constitutes good and bad, not evil. This isn't a story that's dealing with evil. And there's also a moment where Willie explains why Goldwyn is called Goldwyn. So that's a very specific name. I didn't just make it up. There was thought put into those very letters, all what, seven of them, that mean something. And there's a moment where, and he doesn't know this himself, but it dawns on him having looked at the word, that a moment comes to him, and that is a moment that kind of spells out what this little story is, and the questions that they have related to um, good or bad. And
Mm-hmm.
so Aristotle, so the more pragmatic, earthly needs, and then Plato's more idealistic, otherworldly goals or designs, and the the title's called Good Old Willie also for a reason. And I had a lot of fun with it. It's again not very long. To me, this is probably a good opportunity for people to explore Goldwyn County to see if they want to venture into the longer Goldwyn County Candy Ban. And again, this is a great example, Tony, of Goldwyn County. The Goldwyn County Candy Ban is focused on an 11-year-old kid, whereas Good Old Willie is not. Let's just say it is the complete opposite of that. So anyone going into Good Old Willie thinking that Chat's going to pop up on his bike somewhere, it's not going to happen. And those are the kind of distinctions that I like to make as a creator of this world, is to they're interconnected. It's all familiar to a reader that might be familiar with what I'm doing. That, oh, okay, it's Goldwyn. There are certain themes that I explore related to human existence. Like even the Goldwyn County Candy Ban, it is an existential. There is an existential piece to it. Um, not in the heavy kind of like Sartre kind of way, not heavy and dreadful and or anything like that. Um, but it is about meaning, right? And it is about why we're here and what we're doing. And I think Good Old Willie taps into that a little bit more. I'm a little bit more comfortable with that story, doing it in that story than I am in a story that's really about action and adventure. To me, Goldwyn County Candy Ban, that's going to be the last time I ever write from an 11-year-old perspective. Like even the prequel, like I said, it could deal with another perspective. It's going to be a little bit older. I don't know if I want to do the young kid thing again because I don't want to be anywhere near YA. You know what I mean? Like it's just not my thing. And people are like, oh, is it YA? I'm like, well, I don't think it is, but it's tricky. I get it. I see what you're saying because it is a young kid as the protagonist. But yeah, so Good Old Willie is a very exciting piece for me.
Gotcha. And if readers, chose the Goldwyn County Candy Ban going forward and they read it, what do you ultimately hope stays with them after they leave Goldwyn County?
Well, I mean, a unique premise, obviously. Maybe a, not warning, but just, freedom is precious. I mean, a woman is arrested in the story for baking with sugar. Okay, like how does that happen? And again, because I'm taking it seriously and this is serious satire, the reader can buy into it and for a moment go, wow, man, that's intense. That's like, how did that happen? Yeah. So it is a social commentary about power and authority and to be diligent with regard to what that can do to restrict our own freedoms. And I don't have a political bias either way with it. I think it can happen on either side. I mean, I just feel like power corrupts people, and it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a politician or like a mailman. It just doesn't matter. Like I just feel that it can happen to anyone who's in a position to do so. And this judge was in a position to do so. And it caught people off guard, right? And the other component is it is a fun action adventure story about a kid. But it's also, I think when people read it to the end, they're going to realize that it's not a conventional happy story. There is a lesson here to be learned, that Chat has a lesson to learn here, and maybe people will ponder what that lesson is. I think it's more fruitful leaving it the way that I did for people to think, well, what was his arc? What did he gain from all that? He went through all that, and there's this and that. Was it worth it even? I just like that than the neater endings that kind of tie everything up and give it to you. I like people to walk away feeling a little, not uneasy, but maybe unsettled, just like slightly.
Gotcha. Well, I want to thank you, buddy, for coming on to the Read It Rant podcast and taking us behind the scenes of the Goldwyn County Candy Ban. And everybody listening, if the idea of a 1990s southern county where candy is contraband and kids are getting pulled into the underground candy economy with neighbors watching, neighbors in childhood mischief, and they can suddenly become criminals sounds like your kind of story, make sure you check out the Goldwyn County Candy Ban by my good buddy J Z Zerber. And make sure you support indie authors, follow them, review their books, recommend the stories you enjoy, and help other readers discover books they might never find otherwise. You can also follow the Read It Rant podcast on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Spotify for more author interviews, book reviews, indie author spotlights, and, of course, plenty more ranting. Until next time, keep reading, keep discovering new authors, embrace the rant. Read It and Rant is out.